Good evening and welcome to the Capital Asset Committee meeting for November 12th, 2025. I am Eric Eldridge from the Select Board. I am the chair of the committee. We will start with, open the meeting with introductions. We got a huge group here. I'll start to my left.
Earl Mason, Finance Committee.
Ron Schneider, Select Board.
Good evening, Colin Loisel, Town Manager.
Okay, why don't we jump right in? Let's talk about meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair, I would like to motion that we approve the meeting minutes from the October 4th, 2025 meeting.
The 14th.
I'm sorry,
Yep.
my eyes are blurry. 14th, you're right.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries 3-0-0. Why don't we dig right in? Colin, you're going to take us through the presentation of initial requests, and then we'll talk through it. The floor is yours.
Excellent. All right, before I dive into the initial requests, the purpose for tonight's meeting is for me to briefly go through the requests, particularly in 27, and before we start our department-focused meeting, see if there's any specific information the committee would like to see, so that if any of those items make it past my initial screening, when I come back to you, I'm prepared to answer whatever questions you might have. But at your last meeting, there was a question about the stabilization balances. I had previously shared the current balance of all of our stabilization accounts, showing the percentage of the operating budget. At the request of Mr. Mason, I've updated it to show 3 prior fiscal years. So this is the first time the committee is seeing it. But as you can see, and as Mr. Andrews, our finance director, talked about at your last meeting, our own self-imposed goal in the town's financial policies is to keep our stabilization funds at 7%, no less than 7% of our operating budget. And so you can see that in fiscal year 26, which is where we currently are, and I note that this is a balance as of today because it includes the quarterly deposits to road maintenance stabilization. It also includes some of the interest that's been accrued, is 8.1% of the operating budget. That number by the end of this fiscal year will increase because the road maintenance stabilization fund generally hovers at the end of the fiscal year around $1.2 million. You could see that in fiscal 25, 24, and 23, that number was higher. And those of you will remember that in the last town meeting, there was a warrant article to use about $680,000 from the general stabilization fund to cover an arbitration settlement. So obviously that number dipped down. In this current fiscal year, we also used roughly $150,000 from the capital asset stabilization fund, and so that's reflected as a reduction here. So I have nothing really focused on this except for that this was something that the committee wanted to see at its last meeting. So I will share this updated one with the whole committee, and certainly if you have specific questions, either myself or our finance director can walk through it.
I'll open up to the board. Questions or comments relative to that? Mr. Mason?
I think it's reasonable. I like looking at it to see this 10 to 11%. I know we have a goal of 7, but it feels right, and that 7 goal to me is a very reasonable goal. And the being above it, I think, again, just reflects the fiscal responsibility, of this committee. That's great. I'm good.
Schneider?
I have no questions. I agree with what Earl said. I think it's fine, yeah.
Yeah, and I just think it's, some of these we need to get them up as it's a percentage of our budget. Our budget goes up every year. So we need to make sure that these are getting up a little bit higher. It is important to note that, so for the road stabilization, there's money in there now, but at the beginning, a couple of months ago when we funded everything, then it was almost at 0 at that point. It starts out, we probably want to make sure that we're at the 7% at its lowest during the course of the year. If it's higher, I don't think anybody's going to worry too much about that. But I think, ultimately our goal should be to get general stabilization higher, get capital asset stabilization a little bit higher than it is, perhaps look at debt stabilization, but the reality is right now we've got some pretty lean years
Yeah.
for extra cash, just because dealing with the 900,000 that we've got to deal with for the operating budget relative to the middle school financing. So I think we need to let, new growth catch up to that, but anything we can do to have stabilization numbers go up, and Colin knows, he knows what our thinking is on that, when we get to final budget time, is trying to see what we can do. I think ultimately, the reason we did this is to say, okay, how much do we have to work with relative to, for capital assets? So maybe that's a good segue into what we know so far as to the projects that are being requested. Does that sound good?
Tremendous
Sounds like a
segue.
good segue.
I love segues.
Okay, so I will, I'm going to spend most of my time on the 2027 items, but I will briefly touch on the remaining ones. You may notice many of these are items that have appeared on the capital plan previously. Most of them actually were items that weren't funded last year that we moved to fiscal year 27. I think that in total there were 9 new requests this year, and some of these numbers have been updated, obviously, because prices have escalated. So starting right on the top in fiscal year 27, we have 2 requests from the fire department. One is a carryover from previous years, which is to replace Tank 1. Tank 1 is our largest tank truck, which carries the most amount of water. I think it's a 3,500-gallon tank. This piece of apparatus, of course, is important to the department. We do still have some parts of town that have less than adequate hydrant coverage. That truck is currently still running. It is also our most requested mutual aid asset. Anytime there's a structure fire in any of our mutual aid communities, Tank 1 responds almost automatically. Also here, Station 3 generator. Station 3, of course, is the station on Chestnut. Although that is not a fully staffed station, one of the important principles of our emergency planning is that in the event that we had some sort of isolating disaster where parts of the town, particularly that Chestnut Road part, is isolated from the rest. And, one example we hope never happens, but could, there's a culvert that runs under Westford Road that we have identified as being a priority to replace. Unfortunately, it's close to 1.5 million. There's serious utility challenges. But a good example is if that culvert gave way in the middle of a massive storm, where we typically have our emergency shelter at the elementary school, much of the town would be cut off from getting there unless they then traveled through Dunstable and up. So replacing the generator there, I think, is an important item. It isn't staffed 24/7, but it allows us the ability to charge some of the equipment that our emergency apparatus require and to operate that place as a shelter. On the IT department side, another carryover from last year is the police department server upgrade, as well as backup and recovery solution. Right now, the server at the police department has outlived its warranty life, if you will. It's still up and running, but one of the part of capital planning that our departments take serious is planning for when items need to be replaced. And we did the server here using capital a few years ago, I think 2 or 3 at this rate. We've built in some redundancies in the system through our fiber network, but there are unique servers and systems at the police department. For instance, their CAD for the 911 system, the RMS, none of that is connected to town hall, so this would allow us to ensure continuing operations over there. The backup and recovery solution is for our entire network and was one of the critical items identified in our ongoing cybersecurity planning, which was funded by a state grant. On the police department, the capital items for the building are continued, not carried over. They were planned for fiscal 27, but they come from the LaValle Brenzinger assessment of the police station that we did last year. So funded in this year's capital was the building envelope that dealt with the structure of the building. So there's waterproofing in the foundation repairs, roof bracing, and windows included in what was funded for fiscal 26. The next item is the siding, and that is $185,000. We took these numbers from the 5-year capital plan that LaValle did, so they have built in cost contingency. So that's why this number hasn't increased from what was on the plan last year. There's approximately $25,000 worth of flooring in the police department that hasn't yet been replaced. That's largely in the office space area. Last year, we used capital to replace the first floor, so that's the dispatch center, the lobby. Upstairs, we haven't touched. That carpet is original to the building. I was there for a meeting not too long ago. It is basically paper thin and relatively embarrassing. These are up-to-date numbers. We asked the same company that installed the last set of carpeting to update the quote they had previously given us, so we know that for $25,000 we can finish the carpeting at the police department. Also at the police department is replacement of emergency lighting. That was another item that was identified in the LaValle Brenzinger report. I will note that this dollar amount, $24,000, is technically $1,000 less than the $25,000 threshold. As we've talked about numerous times, the committee has discretion. Any of you, and all of you have, either through the select board or the finance committee, looked at the police department's operating budget. There's not 24 grand in that building. I will note that this emergency lighting is important, particularly if you think about some of the scenarios where we'd have to evacuate prisoners from the Sallyport area or from our holding cells. And then $65,000 to upgrade our security system. This has been a need for quite some time. I won't discuss much because I don't want to discuss operational safety in a meeting, but what I will say is that the current system is so challenging that there's not actually a vendor that currently supports it. What we would like to do and what we held off on doing was identifying a town-wide vendor that we can use. We did the security upgrades in this building. We just finished it last year using ARPA funds. We would like to switch to the same system. Currently, the police department has 24/7 access to the security system here. Our goal would be to do the same thing over there. These numbers have been refreshed by our vendor, so $65,000 replaces all of the existing cameras at the police department. It connects them to what is our cloud-based system. Currently, the police department operates your traditional records in a single area. And it adds a few cameras to some of our blind spots. I don't have to go into the importance of a security system. I left on here, but we'll likely not keep it on here because I haven't met with police yet, so I didn't want to make changes without meeting with them. But the $7,500 for the electrical panel replacement is something that I think that we can absorb in the operating budget. There's really no other clean project in here that it could fit in with. It was added last year. I haven't had a chance to meet with the police department to talk about their request yet, so I left it on there just out of transparency.
Well, what about with the building emergency lighting, right? I sit there and say, you're gonna have some electrical stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm sitting there saying, like, the police building, the way I look at it is, there was a bunch of stuff that we haven't done with that building for years. Should we, and I think we've talked about this before, to sit there and say, should we sit there and say, look, there's X amount that we can afford over the next few years per year for the police building, and then just have you work with the chief and other facilities folks to sit there and say, here's the best way to go through and spend that money, because, I mean, I think we're gonna have to spend a bunch of money until we get a new station, which isn't coming anytime soon.
Right.
Agreed.
We've been waiting for a while, and I sit there and say, with the 7,500, the electrical panel, yeah, we just have to figure out how we're gonna fund it. I let you, Colin, do your magic as to how much of that's coming from capital versus operating or whatever, but I'm just wondering if we don't combine some of these things and just sit there and say, these are police
Yeah.
building improvements, they're capital
Yeah.
in aggregate. So I don't know what other people think about that, but I just look at the sheer
No,
number
I
of
think
these
it's a good
things.
idea. I think you look at the improvements to the police department as really one project. Yes, there's a whole lot of different costs. Some are more than, our threshold, some are below that, but it's a single project, that we're trying to maintain.
Over multiple years.
Over multiple
Yeah.
years, but still.
That's a great idea.
Agree.
Okay.
So maybe that's just a different way to look at it, to come up with
Sure.
some of these things, because, I mean, I'd love to sit there and say, oh, no, they'll be fine, we don't have to spend anything, but we did that for a while,
Yeah.
and now we gotta pay.
That's a tremendous point, and so to that point, I'm going to skip to the last building-related item for police in 27, which is updates to the armory. This is something that's actually been on the capital plan for at least 3 fiscal years now. It is certainly tied to a security improvement, right? This is the armory is where all the weapons are stored. It's where they do work on weapons. It's got to be a secured environment. So I think, to Mr. Eldridge's point, having a building deferred maintenance, if you will, lump sum, where still this committee, the select board, and town meeting can see what those individual items are, but lumping it together probably makes a lot of sense. The final item is mobile data terminal replacements. These are the computers that are in cruisers. I don't know if this makeup of the committees have this conversation, but certainly other variations of it have. We've, in many cases, switched to including things that appear on a regular replacement in the operating budget. Think tasers for a while, police cruisers. One of the challenges with doing a staggered replacement for the mobile data terminals is that these come out of the cruiser with the officer and go into other cruisers. So we have spare vehicles that have the mount, but don't necessarily have a data terminal in it. So the challenge with that becomes if you've got 3 cars that have a mount for a 2025 mobile data terminal, and then you buy 3 new 2026 ones, you now lose the operability of switching them out. So we have traditionally, and my recommendation moving forward is that we continue to do this, replaced all of the mobile data terminals at once. It's just a fancy way of saying laptops. This connects the cruisers to the CGIS system, to the dispatch data. It allows them to run plates, run names, and it's also where officers do their reports. So they go into the station with the mobile data terminals. So it's not like we're paying for these mobile computers, and then also we have desktops where they're sitting. So they are kind of getting both uses. Moving along to Public Works. One of the things that I want to note before we dive into this is that the back order on getting our dump trucks, which are the big trucks that sand and plow at the same time, is so incredible that 3 years ago we ordered a dump truck using capital funding, and I still can't tell you today when it will be delivered. We expected it in November. It's been pushed back. We're told potentially in the spring. The challenge that places for us is that we're addressing a need 3 years ago, and it's not coming to fruition until four years later. In the meantime, we had a 2015 truck completely blow up. It is no longer operational. So the truck that we ordered would have replaced a 2008. The 2008 is now still on the road, and we're still down one because of that 2015. We didn't replace any in last year's capital plan, and I don't believe we replaced any the prior year because we hadn't received one. But we are now getting to the point where we would be up a creek without a plow and sander if another truck went down. So in the 2027 plan, one of the things that our highway department, the division within Public Works, is really good at is scrapping items from other vehicles. In fact, I met with our DPW superintendent today. We're planning a surplus auction. And it's funny, when you look at all the equipment, the old trucks that we're surplusing, there's nothing left to them because they take the tires and put them on this truck. So in this case, 280 will not typically get you your 6-wheel dump truck with a plow and sander, but we have salvaged from the 2015 truck the plow and the sander. So this is going to really just get us the 6-wheel dump. Mm-hmm. We're still looking. We talked to our vendor. We'll be switching vendors because that 2015 died, but you're still looking at a year plus before you get this.
Did you know the other one was going to be, did they 2 years, 3 years?
No.
What was the deal when we bought it? Did someone say delivery will be in 12 months? Or?
We were seeing 12-month delivery times, particularly after the pandemic, and we ordered this 3 years ago, so we were right on the heels coming off of it. But yeah, and we've, to the DPW's credit and to our highway foreman's credit, we've reached out to every other vendor. We haven't paid for the truck, so we have the flexibility to take, to just cancel the order. They'll sell it. They're not worried about that. There's no other vendor that can get it. And so now we're at the point where we're at least in the queue. Do we run the risk of taking the money out and going somewhere else? So to that end, it is, in my opinion, important that this year we include the replacement of a 6-wheel dump truck. Public Works, as you may know, also now encompasses our facilities division. This building is 26 years old. The sprinkler system has typically a useful life of 25 years, and so what we've started to see is that it's springing leaks. It's a dry system, which means that, I'm going to explain this probably wrong, and I'm sure that our DPW folks are watching, so I'll sound like a fool, but the small amount of pressurized liquid that is in the pipes sits on the bottom of the pipes. And according to the sprinkler company, the pipes that we used aren't the greatest. When we did it 25 years ago, they were the cheapest option, I guess. So we've started to notice, it's funny, it starts where the system head is in the library. Over the summer, we had a pipe burst in there, had to replace a section to the tune of about 11 grand using the operating budget because it was an emergency. This 25,000 addresses leaks that we've identified on this side of the building, primarily in the town clerk's office where a lot of records are. It would replace the cheap pipe with a galvanized pipe that will last a lot longer. The leaks right now are slow enough that it's not causing tremendous. If you go into the clerk's office, you can see small spots, but it's not causing damage. But if it gets to the point that we had in the library, you've got the compressed air, the liquid spraying out, and the town clerk's office, of course, is where all of our vital records are kept. So that's a facilities request, but as you know, Public Works now oversees that. And then the school department included in their 2027 request is I guess this would be the second phase of MacBook replacement. Last year, they had a request to do phased replacement. They ended up incorporating that first phase in the school building project because they were for the middle school, and there's an FF&E and technology budget in that project. So this would be for the rest of them. And then a replacement of one of their maintenance trucks to the tune of $65,000. And then I don't know why the Public Works request got split up like this. Clearly, I don't know how to sort the sheet. But they're also looking to replace one of the 1-ton pickup trucks. One of the things that our superintendent is looking to do is reduce our reliance on the 6-wheel dump trucks where possible. And so if you think of some of our smaller lake neighborhoods or even along the river, if we can get this 100,000 includes the pickup truck, it includes the plow and a sander that would fit in that body as opposed to the large ones. The only drawback is it will hold less sand, so that truck will have to come back and fill up. But it will certainly result in less use of those bigger trucks, which are becoming harder and harder to get, but then also more and more expensive to repair. And so you'll see that in 2028, we're looking to replace a second 1-ton pickup truck. And these pickup trucks aren't, unlike the 6-wheel dump trucks, these are obviously used year-round. In the summertime, they're towing the landscape trailer, the line striping trailer, the hot box, and all kinds of other equipment. And then we include in here, as you know, as a courtesy, the capital plan that's planned for the Sewer Commission. This doesn't appear in your recommended plan because the Sewer Commission has the authority over their budget, and it doesn't appear in the capital article at town meeting, again, because Sewer has it. So that's 2027. There's nothing really surprising as we move along into 28, 29, and 30. In fact, a lot of it is series of replacements. But just a couple things that I would note here. The police department will be looking in 2028 to replace their CAD and RMS software. They're already actively engaged in conversations with various state entities and regional agencies about joint purchasing and grants. So we left that number on there as just kind of an awareness, but that might change. And the only other things I wanted to point out is that you'll see that we've kicked the ladder truck purchase all the way back to fiscal year 2031. That's a $1.1 million purchase. That number certainly by FY31 will be closer to $2 million. The chief and I have had several conversations about understanding the best approach for replacing that. Knock on wood, Tyngsborough doesn't have very many high buildings. There are certainly advantages to having a ladder truck. But one of the things that we're looking at is how quickly can we get a mutual aid ladder truck, and maybe, and you're seeing this everywhere across the state, cities and towns are saying, well, if Tyngsborough is purchasing a new tank truck, maybe I won't invest in a tank truck, but I will replace my aging ladder truck. That's the beauty of the mutual aid network. I will note Drake had just put in service a new ladder truck to the tune of, I think, $1.6 million. So it's an incredibly expensive purchase. Ours is still running. But again, it's not something that we're driving to every call due to the size and that. So what I'm looking for is if any of these requests, particularly in 2027, pique an interest or you have any specific concerns or questions so that I can go back to the departments and make sure that I'm prepared should I include that in my recommended plan.
I'll open it up to the board.
I think that was a thorough explanation going through line by line. I think, without reading all the justifications, you clearly gave great explanations. So, no, I mean, for first pass, first blush, there's nothing on here that just sticks out to me that says we should not do it. So I think it's a very good first pass, yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Schneider?
I agree. I think it's a good first pass. One question I would ask, we talked about the data terminals for the police vehicles. Is the mount or the connection not sort of an industry standard thing where, like a USB, for lack of a better term, where even if you had an older one from 5 years ago and now you're in a newer vehicle, that it has the same mount? I mean, that would be ideal, because then you could phase them in over time, but if that changes, then I would agree, you'd probably want to change them all at once, but it's worth asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only thing I would say is, like, so for example, the 1-ton pickups, what's the impact if you just use contractors, right? So we have contractors for a bunch of the roads during those. You're not going to have it for during the summer and all those. But I would just ask the departments to look at what alternatives are for that. I appreciate the regionalization. I think that that's something that we should be looking at. Just because we've always done it that way and we always had those items, we should be taking an opportunity to see if there are other ways in which we can go through and do it. Because, I mean, the net on it, I can tell you, we don't have the money to fund all that. So
Right.
it's one of those things that I think we just need to have, we need to look at whether there are alternatives. And
Yeah.
it will face scrutiny from this committee, from finance, a select board, and absolutely a town meeting. So they should have as much of that covered.
Agree.
And then, it's the ladder truck. Didn't I see that in front of, I think, the Senate, they had the owners of the companies that make the ladder trucks, because their profits have been through the roof and the cost. So I don't anticipate that anything will change on that.
Yeah.
But it's not like it's unique to us. This is something that's happening across the country. And there may be some people that might be gouging municipalities.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, I think it's comprehensive. I think there's a lot of stuff in there. I feel confident that you working with the department heads, there'll be appropriate back and forth scrutiny on it, so that by the time it comes to us, there might be a few that are, that we have to have an in-depth discussion. But I think if you guys, what kind of questions we're going to ask, so you can give them a heads up and say, you might have to do better on that one. Or, you know what, I get it, but you might need to take them down that journey.
Absolutely.
Schedule.
Yeah, so just looking ahead here, I don't suspect, I know for a fact that I won't be prepared to have a recommended plan for you. We were very optimistic when we did this. I don't suspect that I'll have something for you next week. So what I would suggest, and I'll reach out to the whole committee to get dates, I probably would be ready to recommend my first pass the first week of December. So I will reach out following this meeting to get dates. In the meantime, as you review those future plans, if there's anything that you think of that you want clarification on, let me know. And as I meet with the departments, if there are any updates, I'll share periodically the updated summary sheet so that you all have it.
Yeah, those are things we can look at it even on an off meeting, just to sit there and say, hey, this one's a little bit light, or here's some questions, and you'll be able to gauge by some of the questions that they might want to expand upon their descriptions of the need.
Yeah.
I think we're going to look, I think we asked David last time, to maybe some kind of, how are we going to pay for this? What percentage is debt? What percentage from, stabilization? What percentage is operating? And kind of some what-if analysis.
Yeah, I don't know if it made it to capital. David did put together a workbook that we can play with based on, that basically, what he's focused on, and he said this in his last meeting, is what the operating budget impact, the debt payments are.
Yep.
He did create a spreadsheet that he shared with Sean and I that we'll be able to plug in to figure out. I still think that we're looking at a total capital plan somewhere in the $1 million range between free cash and some new borrowing. But as we kind of screen out some of the requests, we'll have a better idea.
Yeah, and I think we'll have a much better feel for where we are trending on the revenue side. I mean, that's the hard part, is we're still in the best guess of where things are going to be. But as we get a little bit further, it'll come to light. And that's the problem with going too early on some of this. I think we went back and forth a few times last time. We're like, oh, we think we're going to pay for it this way. And then it was like, all right, we need to go through and do it this way. So it's good to be prepared, but sometimes if we're too early,
When
You know,
will
we're
we
kind of
know,
bouncing
when will we know the free cash number? That's still getting close.
So we are, I'm going to jinx it, but
it's okay.
typically we're waiting for the accounting side.
Yep.
The accounting side is done.
Good.
And at the select board's meeting on Monday, the last step is for them to approve the tax rate. That's when they ceremonially decide whether we do a single tax rate or a split.
Got it.
Our assessor's office is arguably the most efficient in the state, so they'll submit that, I would imagine, by midweek next week, which means the state will start their review. So I would imagine that before Christmas, we have a solid number. We'll certainly know what the state's formula shows us.
Yep.
I don't suspect that it'll be certified before Christmas, but we'll know what the dollar amount is as soon as we submit it to the state.
Great.
excellent. So TBD on the next meeting. We'll communicate out and see what works for everybody's schedules. Anything else that you wanted to cover, Colin?
That'll do it.
Anything board members would like to?
I'm good, thank you.
Motion,
I'll entertain a motion.
motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That carries 300. Good evening, everybody. Have a good one.
Good night.